Chapter 21. Fusion's Future. A feeble sun broke over the sagging rooftops, draping the battered warehouse in pale gold. Within its rusted walls, an uneasy hush held sway. The watchers had spent the night tending to the newly freed Dreamweavers, coaxing them away from the nightmares of sedation. Now, in the cool dawn, they gathered in a circle among crates and abandoned machinery, each face haunted by exhaustion, yet alight with a flicker of renewed hope. Selene stood near her parents, still fragile from their captivity, but awake enough to sense the tang of possibility in the air. They hadn't spoken much, words stumbling through sedation's lingering hold. Yet each time Selene glanced at them, her chest squeezed with both sorrow and resolve. She'd found them, saved them from the regime's assimilation. Now she owed it to them, and every Dreamweaver, to carve out a future that wasn't haunted by illusions. Ava, leaning on her crutch with stoic determination, looked around the circle. "We've done the impossible once more," she began, voice carrying softly through the echoing space. "Freeing these detainees from Annex Delta, your parents included, Selene, proves we're not beaten. But the meltdown illusions haven't eased. If anything, they're intensifying." She winced as a stray swirl of color shimmered at the warehouse's far corner, another rogue meltdown vision slithering at the edges of reality. Selene stifled a shiver. Over the last hours, watchers had reported nightmarish shapes prowling the deserted streets, illusions amplified by the city's fear. The meltdown's tear in the dream realm remained wide open. "We can't hide forever," Draven said gravely. He stood with arms folded, stubble darkening the lines of his weary face. "The meltdown is a dream wound that needs healing, and the regime, even if we sabotage the Nexus engine, will keep pushing new tech if they sense we can't stop these illusions." Some watchers nodded in grim agreement, others exchanged anxious glances. At the fringes, the detainees huddled, eyes downcast. Selene's parents hovered close to her, each leaning on the other as if the only anchor they had was each other's presence. Ethan stepped forward, tension coiled in every word. "We've proven illusions can be harnessed. Selene did it in that corridor. But that was a temporary fix. To truly quell meltdown illusions, we have to mend the tear in the dream realm's fabric. That's not a feat of brute force. It's a matter of forging harmony." Selene sighed, remembering her failed attempts to seal the tear alone. "We need more than just me," she murmured. "The meltdown illusions feed on fear and chaos. If enough Dreamweavers stand together, if we unify, maybe we can anchor the entire dream realm in balance. But we're scattered and battered, and we still have a traitor in our midst." At that, a heavy silence pressed down. Whispers had circulated through the watchers since the last ambush, each suspecting a mole, none possessing proof. Had the meltdown overshadowed that threat too deeply? A soft rustle broke the hush. One of the detainees, a wiry man with hollow cheeks, cleared his throat. "We spent years forcibly linked to the regime's assimilation system. We saw glimpses of each other's dreams, forging a bond we never wanted." His eyes glimmered with tears. "But that bond taught us something. Shared dreams can be a shield against illusions, or even a weapon to dispel them, if enough of us concentrate. We do that, and meltdown illusions might lose their grip." Murmurs rippled through the watchers. Selene felt a spark of cautious hope. Perhaps these detainees, intimately familiar with manipulated dreams, had the key to a real cure for the meltdown. She caught Draven's eye. He gave a small nod as if reading her thoughts, but Ava's voice was pained. "We can't risk a large-scale dream synchronization unless we're sure the meltdown illusions won't devour us," she said. "Or the regime won't pick that moment to strike again." "We'll have to guard ourselves in both realms," Draven agreed. "Set a perimeter in the physical world, fend off enforcers if needed, and unify our dream powers, forging— call it a fusion of spirits, if you will. It's risky." He scanned the circle. "But I see little other choice." Selene's heart thudded. She recalled how fragile illusions had been in battle, But if the detainees, watchers, and every Dreamweaver who could muster the strength stood together, perhaps they could channel something beyond illusions, a stable dream anchor that mended the tear. She pressed her lips tight, glancing at her parents. They met her gaze with tremulous, encouraging looks. Victor spoke up, crossing his arms. "And the traitor among us? If we attempt a mass dream synchronization, they could sabotage it from within, feed the meltdown illusions, alert the regime. We'd be powerless before we even begin." A cold dread prickled the nape of Selene's neck. The traitor was the rotted plank underfoot, ready to collapse. She squared her shoulders. "We proceed carefully. We have watchers in the real world who'll keep watch. If the traitor tries anything, we root them out. Because if we hesitate—" Her voice faltered, but determination flared. "We lose the city entirely." Murmured assent rose. A plan took shaky shape. Gather all available Dreamweavers, watchers, detainees, and attempt to synchronize dream ritual, bridging meltdown illusions with Oneiric Fusion. Meanwhile, a handful of watchers would guard the perimeter, prepared to handle any physical threat, enforcers or sabotage. A tension-laced hope spread among them, cautious but genuine. The detainees straightened, some exchanging glances with watchers who had once been strangers. Unity, forced upon them by crisis, lit a fragile spark in the gloom. They spent the next hours consolidating. The watchers scoured the battered city for Dreamweavers in hiding, welcoming them to this final stand. Despite the meltdown illusions prowling the streets, whispers reached every corner, a chance to mend the realm, to push back the regime's dream tyranny once and for all. Selene's parents, still weak, insisted on participating. She tried to dissuade them, but her mother's faint voice trembled with conviction. "We dreamed of a day we'd stand free in the realm again. We're not letting you fight alone." Selene fought tears. The meltdown illusions hovered around them like anxious phantoms, swirling at corners and rafters. She glimpsed shadows and half-familiar shapes, moments from her childhood, nightmares from the Watcher's darkest nights. Yet each swirl reminded her of the city's desperate need for unity. She and Ethan worked side by side, preparing dream stabilizers, gleaning tips from the detainees' experiences with forced assimilation. Draven and Ava organized watchers into shifts, double-checking each vantage point for potential sabotage. By twilight, the warehouse hummed with subdued energy. Dreamweavers new and old ringed the central floor, forming a wide circle around Selene and her parents. The watchers arrayed themselves at the perimeter, guns ready, illusions at the edges of their vision. The tension was palpable, each inhalation filled with unspoken prayer. Ethan stood at Selene's left, fingers laced with hers, offering silent comfort. Her parents flanked her, leaning on each other for strength. Draven, on the opposite side, gave Selene a nod. "Now or never," that look said. Selene closed her eyes, inhaling the hush. The meltdown illusions trembled in the rafters, drawn by the concentration of Dreamweavers. She recalled every lesson, every near failure, every moment her illusions had broken or soared. Summoning that luminous spark of Oneiric Fusion, she felt it ripple across her skin, lighting her nerves with warmth. Then, with a subtle gesture, she guided it outward. A soft pulse shimmered in the center of the circle. One by one, the Dreamweavers joined their mental energy. Ava's empathic flow, Draven's steadiness, the detainee's fierce longing, Ethan's unwavering presence. Threads of dream stuff twisted, forming a tapestry of swirling color. The meltdown illusions, once savage, seemed to tilt in curiosity, drawn by the combined resonance. Selene's heart pounded. She felt the tear in the dream realm's fabric, that gaping wound feeding illusions into reality. She let their collective fusion flow toward it, weaving through the meltdown's raw edges. Fear clawed at her gut. Would the illusions lash back? But the Dreamweavers' unity formed a protective shell, each mind supporting the others. Some illusions flared violently, a wave of monstrous shapes lunging into the circle. The watchers at the perimeter tensed, illusions of their own sparking in defense. Shots rang out as a few enforcers, lured by the psychic bloom, attempted to breach. But watchers held strong. The circle of Dreamweavers never wavered. For a moment, it felt like the meltdown illusions might tear them all apart. Selene could barely breathe under the strain of guiding so many minds at once. But then a wave of calm spread from Ava's battered empathy, from each detainee who had once been forcibly linked, familiar with the synergy required. The illusions softened, coalescing into gentle shapes, trailing glints of color as they folded into the shared tapestry. Selene gasped, tears forming. She sensed the tear in the dream realm giving way, not in destruction but in rebirth. Fusion poured in, sealing fissures with a tapestry of hope. The meltdown illusions that had prowled the city brightened into harmless illusions, glimmers of memory, not monsters of chaos. Across the circle, watchers and Dreamweavers exhaled in relief. The swirl of color receded, leaving behind a hush that felt like the city itself had sighed. Gunfire from outside trailed into silence as the enforcers retreated, unnerved by the shift in atmosphere. Dreams that once roamed as nightmares now shimmered like ephemeral guardians overhead. Selene blinked, body trembling with exhaustion. She glanced at Ethan, whose eyes brimmed with awe. Her parents, tears streaming down pallid cheeks, clutched each other's hands. Draven sagged, shoulders trembling, the tension melting from his features. And Ava knelt with both palms on the floor, emotional tears slipping down her face. They had done it, mended the meltdown's tear, reclaimed illusions as a force of unity rather than fear. The watchers stood in the aftermath, battered and breathless, but triumphant. In that breathless moment, Selene knew everything had changed. The meltdown illusions no longer snarled at the corners of reality. They hovered like gentle ghosts, fragments of possibility. The watchers had proven illusions could be harnessed for healing, and that no tyranny or sabotage could sever the bond they'd forged. She sank to her knees, letting tears fall, the weight of the moment a bittersweet mixture of relief and grief for all they'd lost. Ethan dropped beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. The future remained uncertain. The regime might retaliate, the traitor might strike. But for now, at least, they had reclaimed the dream realm from the meltdown's maw. Selene's parents found her then, kneeling to wrap her in trembling arms. She let out a choked sob, hugging them fiercely. Together in the battered warehouse under the gentle glow of newly tamed illusions, the Watchers and Dreamweavers tasted their first sunrise free of nightmares, forging a new future from the shards of broken dreams.